So Dragon Quest, right? I love it, and so do millions of other people. It was a huge hit when the original Dragon Quest released over 30 years ago, and its popularity has only grown since then. However, when it comes to the gameplay and aesthetics, you'd be forgiven for saying there isn't much difference between the first Dragon Quest and Dragon Quest XI, released in 2018. Dragon Quest is, after all, known for being a very traditional JRPG that sticks to its roots. To say it completely lacks innovation is wrong, though. Several new features and mechanics have been added in each sequel, like having multiple party members in Dragon Quest II, the vocation system introduced in 3, or catching monsters to fight for you in Dragon Quest VIII. But for the most part, the games play pretty much the same. You're always going to be fighting turn-based battles with a small party and going on a big adventure to save the world. You'll always fight the same monsters early on, and very few new monsters will be introduced. The same goes for spells and techniques the characters can use. Most of the spells in the series first appeared in Dragon Quest III and have stayed the same since. Kind of like how in Final Fantasy you will always have Fire, Fyra, and Fyriga, for example. But if we were to compare Dragon Quest to Final Fantasy, we'd see that the Final Fantasy series tries to innovate with every new release. Final Fantasy II brought the skill system, then jobs in 3, active time battling in 4, expanded jobs in 5, espers in 6, materia in 7, the draw system in 8, and learning abilities from items in 9. More recent titles have even done away with the turn-based combat entirely. But it's not just the gameplay that changes in Final Fantasy. The aesthetics change dramatically between titles, at least in the 3D games. 7 and 8 have industrial worlds and fairly realistic character designs compared to the bright cartoony aesthetic of 9, for example. Dragon Quest isn't like that at all. Akira Toriyama lent his style to the series from the start and it never let go. A Draki in Dragon Quest I looks just like a Draki in Dragon Quest IV, 5, or even 11. Even if you were seeing a screenshot of a new Dragon Quest game for the first time without knowing what it was, you could tell straight away that it's Dragon Quest. Unless it turns out to be Dragon Ball. So if the gameplay doesn't change much and the music and the graphic style are the same in every game, why on earth do we keep coming back to Dragon Quest? It sounds like we should be bored after seeing the same things over and over again. So why aren't we? I think simplicity and polish are the two main elements that keep Dragon Quest games from getting stale. Let's not beat around the bush. Dragon Quest games aren't exactly deep RPGs. Even when they go so far as to have a job system for characters, they're all pretty basic. Skill trees aren't huge and winding with choices to make where picking one skill locks you out from another, and jobs can be changed whenever you want. You're not locked into your choices, so don't worry if you don't like it, just change to something else. It's simple. Even combat is pretty basic for the most part. It's often fairly obvious what enemies are weak to which types of magic, and there isn't usually much strategy apart from use the strongest spell, heal when the boss does a big attack, and then go back in the offensive. And if you're stuck on a boss, just grind and go get some new gear. This simplicity in combat makes for a game that's very accessible. Anyone can get good at Dragon Quest without much challenge, and that makes for a nice easy ride. But it's not just the gameplay in Dragon Quest that stays simple. Its writing is very straightforward too. There are plot twists here and there, but the story isn't hard to keep track of. This is especially good for people like me who will often put down a long RPG around halfway through and pick it up again weeks or even months later. Sometimes I've had to restart games or look up story summaries so I can remember what's happening. Not in Dragon Quest. There aren't a million plot threads to keep track of, no difficult story decisions to make, no deep lore that takes hours to read up on. I know I'm usually just going to the next town so the story can progress and get us one step closer to saving the world. But that's the joy in Dragon Quest storytelling. The overall plot doesn't matter so much because it's so bare bones and forgettable. Dragon Quest focuses on telling shorter stories within the larger tale. It's like playing through a bunch of vignettes or short stories while you get strong enough to beat the big bad. Like, I can barely remember who the bad guy was in Dragon Quest XI, but I'll not soon forget disguising myself as the wimpy prince who can't ride a horse, or the chapter with the mermaid looking for her lost husband. Each town is a standalone chapter in itself, filled with interesting and funny characters, so it doesn't matter if I forget what's happening in the world. I can just enjoy this little episode of the Luminary's adventure. And each little bit is so enjoyable because of the high level of polish and care that went into developing and writing the games. Characters are so well written they endear themselves to you as soon as they're on screen. Enemies are well drawn and animated, so they're pleasant to look at too. Akira Toriyama's art is pretty easy on the eyes after all. It's all just so damn charming. Dragon Quest games have this way of keeping a smile on your face from start to finish. Yeah, you've fought slimes a million times before, but look at those cute little faces. I haven't even mentioned the puns. Dragon Quest games are full of them. Towns, characters, weapons, enemies. If it's got a name, it's probably a play on words. Utter Shambles, Prophesaurus, and let's not forget Jack of all trades Abby, who had an evil fig that turned him into a beast called the Master of None. They may be Christmas cracker levels of humour, but you just can't help but laugh every time. And I think that really helps take away the boredom that the repetitive gameplay might instill. Dragon Quest is just fun. It's simple, it's easy, and it's familiar. You know from the get-go you're gonna fight slimes and bunnycorns and a dragon at some point, and you'll kill that dragon with Dragon Slash because every sword-wielding character can learn it in all the games. But that familiarity is important. Dragon Quest is simple, charming, and familiar. Playing a Dragon Quest game is a comforting experience that makes you happy. Playing a new Dragon Quest game is like going back to your parents' house after you've been a student for a while. There are some changes, but most things are still where you expect them to be. It's always warm inside, you don't have to do any housework. Mom makes the dinner and then you just relax afterwards. That's Dragon Quest in a nutshell. I hope you liked my video, and thanks for getting this far. Now that I have your attention, go check out this other thing I did with my friend Danny where we talk about really good games that nobody else played.